I knew she wasn't sorry the moment the coffee hit my skin. It wasn't the heat that stunned me, though it burned sharply, sinking its teeth into my hand. It was the look on Monica's face, the tiny, satisfied twitch at the corner of her mouth before she forced it into something polite and breathy, as if concern were just another accessory she remembered to put on. People always think older women don't notice things, but we do. We notice everything. We've lived too long not to. The burn spread up my wrist, and I held my breath while the chatter at the brunch table faltered. Her voice floated above the silence, sweetened like artificial syrup. "Oh my God, Evelyn, I'm so sorry." My hand just slipped. Slipped. I watched her fingers still wrapped around the mug, steady as marble. Daniel looked from her to me, confusion crossing his face, and for a moment I wanted to protect him from the truth, as I'd done all his life. But the pain flared again, and whatever words I might have offered lodged deep in my throat. I excused myself quietly and walked to the kitchen sink, letting cold water pool over my hand. My reflection in the window wasn't the timid woman I'd let myself become. At 74, I'd earned my right to be something more than a silent sponge for other people's tempers. Still, old habits cling. I stood there trying to steady my breathing, pretending the water numbed anything at all. Behind me, I could hear Monica laughing again, as if nothing had happened. That laugh struck me harder than the coffee. The burn throbbed in slow waves as I drove home later. My fingers stiffened around the steering wheel. I'd told them I was fine, that it wasn't serious. I'd even thanked her for helping clean up, though she never actually touched a towel. It was easier that way, or at least that's what I'd told myself for years. Make things smooth for everyone else. Don't cause trouble. Don't take up space. Women of my generation were trained to fold in on themselves like laundry. But that day, something in me felt too tight to fold anymore. At home, I sat at the table with a bag of ice on my hand, watching the condensation trail down my wrist. My house was quiet, the kind of quiet that presses on your ribs. I thought of the years I'd spent stepping carefully around Monica's moods, her sharp comments wrapped in silk tones, her subtle little ways of reminding me that this was her world, and I was merely visiting it. I never knew why she disliked me. Sometimes I thought it was because I wasn't the sort of mother-in-law people bragged about. I didn't travel or host glamorous dinners. I lived plainly. I didn't ask for much. Maybe that was my mistake. As the ice melted, the memory replayed again and again. The angle of her hand, the way her eyes flicked toward Daniel before the mug tipped. It hadn't been an accident. My bones knew it. My skin knew it. But knowing and proving are different things, and I had no proof. Only the truth sitting quietly in my chest like a stone. Still, the strangest feeling washed over me that night. Not anger exactly, though it simmered low. Not fear either. Something firmer, something I hadn't felt in years. I looked at my hand, swollen and reddened, and for the first time in a long while, I whispered to myself, almost surprised by my own voice, that this moment, was not going to pass the way the others had. There comes a point in every woman's life when she realizes she has allowed too much. And as I watched the bruise deepen under the kitchen light, I knew my point had finally come. By the time morning came, the burn on my hand had settled into a deep, tender ache, the kind that pulses with every heartbeat. I hadn't slept much. Pain kept waking me, but it wasn't the only thing. My mind kept looping the same quiet question. How many times had I excused behavior that should never have been excused? And why had I done it so willingly? I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of weak tea, the kind my doctor insists on, though I still prefer strong black leaves. The steam curled upward in thin ribbons, and for a moment I watched it instead of drinking. My home, small and worn at the edges, felt safe in a way I hadn't appreciated for years. No careful smiles, no sidelong glances, no pretending not to notice the silent judgments that floated around Monica like an expensive perfume. The skin around the burn looked angry, blistering at the edges. I pressed a cool cloth over it and let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. At 74, I've learned that pain reveals truths you can't ignore. Pain taught me that after my husband died. Pain taught me it again yesterday. It has a way of stripping you down to who you actually are when no one is watching. Daniel had called late last night. Twice. I stared at the phone both times and let it ring. I wasn't ready to soothe him or reassure him that everything was fine. Everything was not fine, and I was tired of cushioning his guilt, of smoothing the ripples Monica created. A mother's instinct is to protect her child, even when he's grown into a man with lines around his eyes and a mortgage. But sometimes protection becomes its own kind of harm. I had spent years swallowing my discomfort so he wouldn't have to face it. When the phone buzzed a third time that morning, I picked it up. It was a text from him. "Mom, please let me know how you're feeling. Monica feels awful. She wants to apologize." I stared at the screen for a long moment. Monica didn't feel awful. She felt exposed. That's different. I set the phone down without replying. My hand throbbed again, and I went to the sink to fetch more cold water. As I stood there, the house unusually still around me, my reflection caught me off guard. My hair was gathered in a loose gray knot, some strands falling. My sweater hung a bit too heavily on my shoulders. But my eyes, they didn't look tired the way they usually did. They looked awake. Sharper, as if some quiet corner of me had finally stretched its legs after decades of being told to sit still. I thought of all the hours I'd spent babysitting for them, cooking for birthdays, helping with errands, being the steady pair of hands that everyone took for granted. A dependable old woman with a soft voice and no demands. I used to believe it was kindness, but now I wondered if I'd simply been shrinking myself to fit into the space they allowed. The doorbell rang. I stiffened. For a moment, I debated not answering, but ignoring someone at the door felt too unnatural, too much like hiding in my own home. I opened it slightly, expecting Daniel. Instead, it was my neighbor, Judith, clutching a basket of lemons from her backyard tree. She's my age, maybe a few years older, with sharp instincts and a sharper tongue. "You weren't at church yesterday," she said, stepping inside before I had a chance to decline the visit. "I figured you might have taken ill." I gestured toward my hand. She clicked her tongue when she saw the burn. "Good Lord, Evelyn, what happened?" I didn't mean to tell her. Truly, I didn't. But the words came out gently, almost tiredly. "An accident," or so she said. Judith narrowed her eyes in that way of hers that says she already knows there's more. She set the basket down. "You've been too gentle, Evelyn, too forgiving. People mistake that for weakness." Her voice wasn't unkind, just honest. And honesty, when spoken softly, has a way of settling into your bones. After she left, the house felt different, quieter, but in a way that let me hear myself think. I walked from room to room slowly, letting the afternoon light fall across my floors, my photos, my memories. My late husband's coat still hung by the door, even after 10 years. He'd been the one who always told me, "Don't let anyone make you small, Evie." But grief makes you shrink all on its own. And somewhere along the way, I never stretched back out. The phone buzzed again, but I ignored it. Instead, I sat down with a fresh piece of gauze and tended to the burn. The tenderness flared when I touched it, and I winced. But beneath the pain, something steady was forming. A decision. A quiet one, like most important decisions are, but unshakable. The days of folding myself neatly into corners were ending. Whether Monica knew it yet or not, whether Daniel wanted to see it or not, what happened at that table had woken something in me. And once a woman my age wakes up, she doesn't go back to sleep easily. I spent the next few days moving slowly, not because of the burn, though it still throbbed when I gripped anything, but because I was watching. And when an older woman watches without rushing, she sees more than people expect her to. I've always had a quiet nature. People mistake that for emptiness. But still, water reflects everything. Monica called once, her voice syrupy and light. "Evelyn, I just wanted to check on you. You know I felt terrible about the other day." She didn't ask how my hand was. Not once. I could hear her unloading groceries in the background, humming a song she normally played when she was in a good mood. No guilt lived in that melody. I answered politely, because that's who I am, or rather, who I've been. I listened to her talk about Daniel's workload, about their daughter's ballet recital, about the stress of hosting next month's birthday party. Not a word about the burn, not a word about the way she'd tipped her hand just a little too far that morning. After we hung up, I sat in my armchair and let the silence settle around me like a shawl. Women my age know how to sit with silence. We've swallowed enough of it in our lives. 2 days later, Daniel came by. He walked in with that unsettled look of his, shoulders drawn up, eyes uncertain. "Mom," he said softly, "Monica told me you seemed distant on the phone." "Did she?" I answered, keeping my voice even. He sat across from me, glancing at my wrapped hand, but never asking. The boy I raised would have asked in an instant. The man he grew into now waits for permission before caring. It broke my heart a little to see how carefully he moved around his own wife's emotions. "Is everything all right between you two?" he asked. There it was. Not, "Are you all right?" but "Are you two all right?" So many years, and he still measured me through someone else's comfort. "We're fine," I told him. And it wasn't a lie. We were fine in the same way a room is fine after the clock stops ticking. Quiet, unsettled, waiting. He nodded, relieved. I poured him tea, though pouring hurt, and for a long moment he talked about work, deadlines, new requirements, the usual frustrations. I listened the way mothers do. Then he asked if I could help watch their daughter next week. "Not this time," I said gently. He blinked, confused. "Oh, did you have plans?" "No," I answered, "but I'm resting this hand." And myself. He looked at me as if he didn't recognize me, like I'd spoken in a language he hadn't heard since childhood. I saw the questions forming, the small ripples of worry, but he didn't press. He never pressed when the pressure wasn't coming from his wife. After he left, the house felt heavier, not from sadness, but from truth. When you stop doing the things people expect from you, they feel as though you've changed. But you haven't. You're simply no longer bending yourself into shapes that fit their comfort. Monica's small jabs began to sharpen over the following days. Short messages with clipped endings. Comments to Daniel that floated back to me through him, half-formed and uneasy. "Mom, Monica said you sounded irritated. Did something happen?" "No, nothing happened. Something revealed itself, that's all." I went to their house the following Sunday because Daniel insisted. When I arrived, Monica greeted me with that polished smile that women use when they're hosting for an audience. Daniel was still upstairs getting the little one dressed. "Let me get you a seat," she said, placing the chair a little too close to the noisy vent, the coldest part of the room. She always did that. Subtle discomforts, little misplacements, small stings that she could brush off as nothing. When she handed me a glass of water, she placed it just out of reach, where I'd need to stretch my burned hand. I didn't move. Instead, I folded my hands in my lap and let the moment sit between us. Her smile wavered. "You're usually so helpful," she said lightly. "I'm resting," I replied. "Doctor's orders." She blinked, and I saw something flicker behind her eyes, irritation, sharp and bright. Daniel came downstairs then, oblivious to the silent exchange. But I saw a shift in him, too. He kept glancing at my bandaged hand, at Monica, back at me. Something inside him was tugging at a thread he didn't yet understand. Later, while he walked me to my car, he said softly, "I don't know what's going on, Mom, but I feel like I'm missing something." He was, but he wasn't ready to see it yet. I drove home slowly, my hand throbbing with each turn. The street lamps flickered on one by one, lighting the quiet path ahead of me. Somewhere between their glow and the hum of my old tires, a thought settled deep inside. She wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. And neither was I. The truth found me in the most ordinary way, the way truth often does. Quietly, slipping into a space where it didn't belong. I wasn't looking for it that day. I was only trying to return a book I'd borrowed from my neighbor's teenage babysitter, a sweet girl named Lila, who often watched Daniel's little one. Lila was always polite to me, in that shy way young people can be when they're not sure if older women want conversation or solitude. I knocked on her door, expecting only a quick exchange. Her mother answered, smiling warmly, and called Lila from the back room. She came trotting out, hair in a loose braid, and thanked me for bringing the book. Then, without meaning anything by it, because that's the thing about truth, it doesn't need intention, she said, "I hope the camera caught whoever broke that mug. Monica was so upset about it." I froze, not from fear, but from the way some words suddenly echo differently in your bones. "What camera?" I asked lightly, though my hand tightened around the book's spine. "You didn't know?" "They've had a nanny cam in the kitchen for months," she said, shrugging. "Hidden in that little ceramic sugar jar near the stove. It records everything. Monica told us she checks it sometimes to make sure the sitter is careful with the baby." I stood very still. The air felt different, heavier somehow, like the room had shifted a few inches to the left. Everything. Everything in the kitchen. Including the brunch table. Including the spill. Including Monica's hand. Lila must have sensed she'd said too much because she bit her lip. "Oh, I hope it's okay I mentioned it." "It's perfectly fine," I said. My voice sounded calm, even to me. "Thank you, dear." Outside, I walked back to my car slowly, my mind warm with something that wasn't quite shock. It was recognition. A piece of the puzzle that had been there all along, waiting for me to stop making excuses long enough to pick it up. I sat in the driver's seat without starting the engine. The memory played again, crisp as glass. The mug tipping, the angle of her wrist, the flash of something cold behind her smile. And now I knew. It wasn't just my mind replaying it. It existed somewhere beyond me, captured in pixels and time. I didn't call Daniel. I didn't march over to their house demanding anything. That isn't how women like me move. We don't explode. We rise, slow and steady, like heat off asphalt. Instead, I went home. I set the book on my kitchen table and made myself a cup of tea, though I hardly tasted it. My hand, still healing, pulsed under its bandage, and I traced the edge of the fabric with my thumb. A camera. A camera she'd forgotten about, or dismissed, or simply believed would never turn against her. The next day, the knowledge stayed with me like a secret pressed against my ribs. I went to the grocery store, bought fruit, chatted with the cashier. I watered my plants. Life carried on as usual, but something inside me had shifted, realigned. For the first time in years, I felt as if I were walking with my spine fully straight. Not out of pride, out of clarity. In the afternoon, I stopped by Daniel's house to drop off some hand cream for my granddaughter. I didn't plan on seeing Monica, but she appeared in the doorway the moment I stepped inside, her smile stretched thin. "Oh, Evelyn, how's the hand?" she asked, voice bright, but eyes dull with impatience. "It's healing," I answered. "These things take time." She nodded too quickly. "You know, I still feel horrible about what happened. I barely slept that night." I tilted my head slightly, studying her. "Did you?" She blinked. People don't expect older women to stare directly at them, to hold their gaze without apology. Monica looked away first. Daniel came downstairs then, greeting me warmly, oblivious to the tension threading the room. They chatted about dinner, about errands, about needing a new coffee maker, because the mug had shattered when it hit the floor, of course. I listened, quietly, watching. When I left, I saw Lila's earlier words not as a slip, but as an opening, a door I had never thought to knock on. That evening, as the sky dimmed and the cicadas began their slow chorus, I sat in my armchair and folded my hands, not in prayer, but in patience. The truth was out there, recorded and unblinking. All I needed was the right moment to let it come home. And I knew that moment would arrive. Not because I forced it, but because lies have short legs, and Monica had been running on them for years. The video came to me in the smallest, quietest way, almost shyly, as if it understood the weight it carried. I wasn't expecting anyone that afternoon, and I certainly wasn't expecting the nanny to appear at my door, her jacket half-zipped, her eyes a little red as if she'd been thinking hard about something for hours. Her name was Claire, a soft-spoken girl in her 20s who'd always treated me kindly, never with the condescension young people sometimes show women my age. "Mrs. Carter, do you have a minute?" she asked, shifting her bag on her shoulder. I invited her in, of course. She sat at the edge of the sofa, fingers twisting together in her lap. For a long moment, she didn't speak. I'd seen that expression before. Someone who knows the truth and is deciding whether they're brave enough to say it. "I'm not working for them anymore," she finally whispered. "Monica and well, it wasn't a good fit." I nodded. That didn't surprise me. Monica had a way of draining the air from a room. Claire took a breath. "Before I left, I felt like I should show you something. I shouldn't have access to it, but she often asked me to review clips when I cleaned the kitchen, so I knew where everything was stored." She pulled out her phone. For a moment she hesitated, as though handing me something sacred. "I heard what happened that day," she said quietly, "and I saw the recording." My pulse slowed, then steadied, like a drum beat finding its rhythm. She pressed play. There we were, the brunch table, the bright kitchen, the morning light pouring through the window. I watched myself lift a napkin, smiling gently at something Daniel said. I saw Monica rise from her chair, mug in hand. She paused behind me, her eyes cutting sideways. Not at me, but at the camera she must have forgotten about. Then it happened. Not a slip, not a fumble, not an accident. Her wrist angled just enough, a delicate, deliberate tilt. The coffee spilled like she'd rehearsed it. And then her face. Oh, her face. the soft bloom of satisfaction before she gasped and clutched her chest in feigned horror. I didn't breathe for several seconds, not out of shock, out of recognition. Claire watched me carefully. "I thought you should have this," she said. "I saved the video to a drive. She'll delete it once she realizes, and I couldn't let that happen." When she placed the tiny USB in my hand, it felt heavier than anything its size should ever weigh, like truth does, once it finally chooses a place to land. "Thank you, dear," I said, my voice steady. "You did the right thing." She nodded, her eyes soft with relief, and left as quietly as she came. I sat alone after she was gone, my hand resting on the little silver drive. The burn on my skin pulsed gently, no longer angry, just present, like a reminder rather than a wound. I replayed the scene again and again, not to hurt myself, but to understand the shape of the truth I now held. This wasn't about the coffee anymore. It wasn't even about the pain. It was about the years before it, the snide remarks, the dismissive smiles, the subtle erasures of my presence. The coffee had only been the moment she stopped pretending, and now I had proof. But I felt no rush to use it, no hunger for confrontation. That has never been my way. Women like me don't shout when the truth arrives. We simply open the door and let it stand beside us until the time comes. I placed the drive gently in my jewelry box, among the few things in my life I consider precious. Then I closed the lid, took a breath, and let the house settle around me, warm and quiet. The moment was coming, and when it did, I would be ready. In the days that followed, I didn't rush toward the truth. I simply carried it with me, like a stone in my pocket. Not heavy enough to trip me, but solid enough to remind me of its presence. I didn't watch the video again. I didn't need to. Once you've seen someone's real face, you don't forget it. Not at my age. Not after a lifetime of reading people carefully, the way poor women read weather. What changed first wasn't dramatic. It was small things, practical things. I stopped offering help before being asked. I stopped rearranging my days to fit Monica's schedule. I stopped saying yes to every request that drifted my way like laundry left on the doorstep. The first time Daniel called for a favor, his tone assuming I'd say yes, I simply said, "Not today, dear. I'm resting." There was a pause, just a flicker of silence. "Oh, okay. We'll figure something out." He sounded surprised, not upset, surprised, maybe even a little lost. And in that moment, I realized something. I had trained my son to believe I would always be available, always bending, always smoothing things over. It wasn't wholly his fault. I had helped create that expectation with every quiet sacrifice, every unspoken, "I'll handle it." The second change came when I visited. I didn't hover in the kitchen, waiting to be useful. I didn't fold napkins or chop vegetables or usher the child to wash her hands. I sat on the couch, hands folded neatly, and let the household swirl around me. Monica noticed immediately. "You're not helping?" she asked, with that pointed sweetness of hers, standing by the fridge. "No," I answered gently. "Not today." I watched her face the way one watches the sky when rain threatens. The shift was small but unmistakable. Irritation tightening her jaw, a spark of something mean flickering just behind her eyes. She recovered quickly. "Oh, well, I suppose I'll manage." "You always do," I said softly, and that, strangely, seemed to unsettle her more than anything. There was a birthday party the next weekend. One of those loud, messy things Monica insisted on perfecting. Usually, I'd arrive an hour early to help set up streamers or prepare little plates of fruit. This time, I arrived exactly on time, bringing nothing more than myself. Children darted through the living room, balloons bobbed on strings, and adults hovered over the snack table chatting politely. Monica saw me walk in and blinked, as if I had grown 3 inches taller since she last saw me. "You didn't bring the cupcakes?" she asked, her voice a little too sharp. "You didn't ask me to," I replied. Another flicker in her expression, this one more nervous than annoyed. Daniel drifted toward me, looking both relieved and perplexed. "Mom, everything okay?" "Just fine," I said. "How about you?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "Monica said you've been different. Have you ever noticed how people only use the word different when they mean less convenient for me?" I smiled just a little. "I've been resting," I told him. "Listening to my body. Listening to myself." He looked at me longer than usual, seeking some explanation behind my calm. I didn't offer one. He wasn't ready, not yet. Later, when the cake was served and everyone leaned in to sing, I stood at the edge of the room. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like part of the furniture. I felt like a person, present, watching, choosing. Monica carried plates around the room, her movements brisk. Each time she passed me, her eyes lingered, searching for the woman who used to soften herself into the background. But that woman was gone now, quietly folded away like winter clothes no longer needed. When the party ended, she approached me near the doorway. "You know," she said carefully, "it's unusual seeing you so removed." "I'm simply letting everyone manage what's theirs," I answered. Her smile froze, brittle at the edges. "Is this about the brunch? I told you it was an accident." I looked at her, not sharply, not accusingly, just steadily. A woman my age can devastate with a steady gaze if she wishes. "I know what happened," I said softly. Her breath caught, barely audible, the first crack in her facade. But I didn't press it. Not yet. I just picked up my coat, gave a small nod, and walked out into the evening air. Let her stew in her silence. Let her wonder what I knew, what I planned to do. The truth was no longer rushing toward her. It was waiting. Calm, patient, inevitable. It didn't take long for Monica to realize that something in me had changed for good. Women like her can sense shifts the way animals sense weather. They feel the air tighten, the ground tilt underfoot. And she began to react. Not loudly, not openly, but in small ways that carried sharp edges. The next time I visited, she greeted me with a smile too bright for the hour, one that flashed like polished metal. "Evelyn," she said, "could you straighten the playroom while I finish the dishes? It's a mess in there." She said it the way someone snaps fingers at a dog. I looked at her gently, almost kindly. "No, dear. I'll sit for a bit." The smile flickered. "But it'll only take a moment." "I'm resting my hand," I said, lifting the bandage slightly. "I'm sure you understand." She swallowed something bitter before forcing another smile. I could see it in the way her jaw tightened, the way she set down a glass a little too hard. Her anger wasn't about the playroom. It was about losing a pawn she had assumed would always move at her command. Women like Monica don't crumble when they lose control. They scramble to reclaim it. At lunch that day, she pushed a bowl toward me. "Here, this will help your recovery. Full of nutrients." Her tone dripped sweetness, but the bowl was hot. Too hot. Like she'd pulled it from the microwave seconds before handing it to me. She wanted to see if I'd flinch. I didn't touch it. "I'll wait for it to cool," I said calmly. She looked disappointed. It was becoming a pattern. Later, she hovered near the doorway as I played a board game with my granddaughter. "You know," Monica said lightly, "I told Daniel we should hire someone else to help around the house. If you're not feeling up to things anymore. She wanted to sting me with that one, wanted me to feel replaced, unneeded. That sounds wise, I answered. Her eyebrows shot up. She hadn't expected me to agree. She needed the drama of hurting me, and when I didn't bleed, she lost her balance. She tried again 2 days later. Daniel had invited me to dinner, a simple one, nothing fancy. But I could feel Monica's fingerprints all over the arrangement. She wanted to supervise the situation. The moment I stepped inside, I saw how carefully the evening had been staged. Plates arranged perfectly, candles on the table, her hair styled like she was attending a gala. Daniel hugged me, warm and unaware, and went to stir the pot on the stove. That left Monica and me in the living room, silence stretching between us like a thin wire. "You've been distant," she said finally. "I've been quiet," I corrected. Her eyes narrowed. "It's the same thing." "No," I said softly. "It isn't." She hesitated, choosing her next move. Then she leaned closer, lowering her voice so Daniel wouldn't hear. "If you have something to say, Evelyn," she murmured, "I'd say it now." I looked at her, really looked, at the carefully drawn eyeliner, at the tension tightening every line of her face, at the fear she was trying to hide under perfume and polish. "I have nothing to say," I replied. "But you do." That rattled her. She stepped back like she'd touched something electric. At dinner, she performed sweetness for Daniel's benefit. Compliments, soft laughter, gentle touches on his arm. But her eyes kept cutting toward me, searching for some sign of weakness, some proof that she still held power over me. She found none. I ate slowly, calmly, even when she tried to steer the conversation toward topics that made me uncomfortable. It's an old tactic. Shift the ground beneath someone's feet and hope they stumble. But age teaches you how to keep your balance even when the floor shakes. When dinner ended and I stood to leave, Monica followed me to the door. Her voice dropped again. "I don't know what you think you're doing, but whatever game you're playing, it won't work." I slipped on my coat, meeting her gaze with the steady calm of someone who no longer needed to raise her voice. "I'm not playing a game," I said. "I'm just done losing." For the first time since I'd known her, Monica didn't have a response. She simply stared, her expression tight, uncertain. A woman like her, shaken by a woman like me. And I knew then, she felt it. She felt the truth moving somewhere nearby. And fear, once it finds a crack, spreads quickly. Daniel began to notice before he understood. That's usually how awareness arrives. Quietly, like a draft under a door. He didn't ask direct questions at first. He lingered longer when he called. He listened more carefully when I spoke. A son can ignore a great many things, but not the change in the rhythm of his mother's voice, not when he was raised on it. One evening, he stopped by after work. It wasn't planned. I could see that in the way he kept shifting his briefcase from hand to hand like he didn't know what to do with himself. His tie was crooked, his eyes tired. "Mom," he said, when I opened the door, "can I come in for a bit?" He hadn't asked like that since he was a boy, afraid to admit he'd broken a window. I made tea for both of us, slowly, using my uninjured hand. He watched every movement, his brow pulling together. "Does it still hurt?" he asked. "Sometimes," I said, "but I'm managing." He hesitated, fingers tapping against his mug. Monica said, "Well, she said you've been acting strange." Withdrawn. Monica's word, not his. "And what do you think?" I asked gently. He looked pained. "I don't know. I feel like something's wrong." "I just don't know what." I nodded, letting the silence stretch. Silence is an old friend of mine, and sometimes it speaks louder than any words. He rubbed his forehead. "Did she say something to you?" Plenty, I said softly. Over the years? His eyes lifted, sharp and confused. What do you mean? I didn't answer directly. He wasn't ready. You can't show someone the whole truth when they're still blinking in the dark. So I reached out and touched his wrist gently. Daniel, I said, when you were small, do you remember how you'd come to me whenever something didn't feel right? Even before you understood what it was? He nodded slowly. That feeling doesn't disappear when you grow up, I added. You just learn to ignore it. He didn't respond, but something in his face, the faint crease between his brows, the soft tightening around his mouth, told me he understood more than he was letting on. A few days later, he invited me to dinner again. Just us, he said. I want to talk. But when I arrived, it wasn't just us. Monica hovered in the kitchen, her movements loud, as if to remind me this was her domain. When Daniel excused himself to check on their daughter, she stepped into the living room, folding her arms. You're turning him against me, she said quietly. I turned toward her. With calm I didn't have to manufacture. No, I replied. But he's starting to see you more clearly. Her expression tightened. He loves me. I know, I said. Which is why you don't need to be afraid, unless you've given him reason to be. She flinched at that, her mouth opening then closing again, like a door caught on its hinge. She didn't know how much he'd begun to notice on his own. The way she dismissed my comments, the way she cut me off mid-sentence, the way she placed things where she knew it would pain my hand to reach. Small things, yes, but small things form patterns, and patterns eventually reveal their maker. Daniel returned, sensing tension, but not its shape. He looked from her to me, and I saw something flicker, concern, protectiveness, confusion, a crack beginning to widen. After dinner, he walked me to my car. The air was cool, scented with the faint sweetness of early blossoms. Mom, he said softly, I feel like I've been missing a lot. You have, I said, not unkindly. He swallowed. Is it about Monica? It's about you, I answered. About what you choose to see and what you choose to ignore. He looked down, ashamed. I didn't realize. You will, I said gently, when you're ready. He nodded, but his eyes were damp. He hugged me longer than he had in years, a deep, almost trembling embrace, as if holding on to something he feared losing. As I drove away, I saw him still standing on the sidewalk, hands in his pockets, staring after my car with that same searching expression. The truth wasn't just waiting for Monica anymore. It was waiting for him, too. And whether he liked it or not, it had already begun to reach him. The accusation came on a Wednesday afternoon, a day so ordinary it almost felt staged. I had stopped by to drop off a small knitted scarf for my granddaughter. Nothing dramatic, nothing emotional, just a visit a grandmother is allowed to make without incident. But Monica must have been waiting. The moment Daniel stepped out to take a work call, she closed the living room door behind him and turned toward me with a smile that had nothing soft in it. I'm going to say this plainly, she began, arms folding tightly across her chest. Your behavior has become concerning. I looked at her, calm as still water. Concerning, I repeated. How so? You're distant, moody, passive-aggressive, she said, counting each word like beads on a string. Daniel's worried, I'm worried, and honestly, she leaned closer. I don't feel comfortable having you around our daughter when you're like this. There it was, the attack wrapped in silk. I let the words settle. Women my age don't rush to fill silence. We let others drown in it if they need to. She mistook my quiet for fear and stepped forward, emboldened. You've been creating tension in the house. You've been rude. And frankly, you've been manipulative. You're trying to turn Daniel against me." I almost laughed, but the sound stayed inside my chest. "I don't have to turn Daniel against anyone," I said gently. "He's simply starting to see." Her eyes flashed, rage mixed with something colder. "Do you deny you've been behaving irrationally?" "I deny nothing," I said. "I simply don't accept your version of events." That unsettled her more than anger would have. She needed me loud, emotional, unstable. She needed a scene she could report to Daniel later, twisting every word to suit her story. But I wouldn't give it to her. She pressed on. "You've been refusing to help. You've been cold to me. It's obvious you're holding a grudge about the brunch. I told you it was an accident." I met her gaze without blinking. "And I told you I know what happened." Her breath caught. I saw the panic flicker, quick, sharp, like a bird beating against a window. But she recovered. "If you're going to make accusations, Evelyn, you'd better think very carefully. Daniel won't tolerate conflict." "You're right," I said softly. "He won't." That unsettled her even more. Then she delivered her final blow, the one she had prepared most carefully. "If this continues," she said, her voice trembling with fake righteousness, "I will insist Daniel limit your visits, for our daughter's sake. I won't have you bringing this negativity into our home." It was meant to wound. It missed. I simply stood, smoothing the sleeve of my sweater. "That is your choice," I said. "But choices have consequences." "You're threatening me?" "No," I answered. "I don't need to threaten you." The doorknob clicked. Daniel stepped back inside, unaware of the fire smoldering behind the quiet. "How's everything going in here?" he asked, smiling. Monica turned instantly, her voice dripping sweetness. "Fine, just fine. Your mother was just leaving." I didn't correct her. I didn't expose her. Not yet. Instead, I kissed my granddaughter's head, put on my coat, and moved toward the door with the steady grace of someone who knows the truth is walking beside her. And as I stepped outside, I felt no fear, because I knew the next move wasn't mine. It would be hers, and she would make it loudly enough for everyone to hear. Daniel grew quieter in the days that followed, and quiet men are often the ones standing closest to truth without knowing it. He walked through his own home as if feeling along the walls for something misplaced. But Monica sensed this too, and like any cornered creature, she escalated. The confrontation came during a Sunday dinner I hadn't planned to attend. Daniel called that morning, asking if I'd join them. His voice was tentative, almost hopeful. I knew Monica didn't want me there. Her silences had grown brittle, like thin ice waiting to crack. But I went. Not out of duty, out of clarity. The moment I stepped into the house, I felt the tension like heat from an oven. Monica was standing at the kitchen island, chopping vegetables with unnecessary force. Daniel hovered near the stove, uncertain. "Evelyn," Monica said without looking up, "so glad you could join us." Her tone was as tight as the grip on her knife. Dinner was a strained affair. Daniel asking questions that didn't need answers. My granddaughter chattering about school. Monica watching me the way someone watches a lit fuse. The moment the plates were cleared, she stood abruptly. "Daniel," she said, "I need to speak to your mother alone." He froze midway through stacking dishes. "Monica." "Please," she added. Her voice dipped in sugar. The kind of sugar that rots what it touches. He hesitated, but he left. I heard him in the kitchen, running water far louder than necessary. A man trying not to hear what he already knows. Monica turned to me, hands pressed against the table. "I'm not doing this anymore," she said. "Your behavior is unacceptable, and you've left me no choice." "I see," I replied calmly. Her eyes widened. She expected defensiveness, or fear, or outrage, anything to justify what she was about to do. "You have been cold, dismissive, and hostile. I'm worried about your mental state," she continued sharply. "And Daniel agrees something is wrong." "Does he?" I asked softly. She faltered, just a second, but enough. "Don't twist my words. You've been acting irrational. You're creating tension in this family. You even make our daughter uncomfortable." I looked at her with a patience she mistook for fragility. "I have done nothing," I said. "That's exactly the problem," she snapped. "Your silence, your moods, your staring. It's manipulative, Evelyn, and dangerous." Dangerous. A word chosen carefully. Then she straightened her shoulders, preparing her final strike. "I've decided," she said, "that you won't be allowed to come here for a while. Not until you can behave like a stable adult. I'm setting boundaries for this family." I studied her face, flushed, trembling, triumph flickering in her eyes like a weak flame. "Are you sure," I asked quietly, "that you want to continue this conversation?" Her mouth curled into a hard smile. "Absolutely." She wanted a fight. She needed one. Something she could carry to Daniel with crocodile tears and trembling hands. But I didn't give her the fire she craved. I simply folded my hands in my lap and said, "Then continue." Her expression cracked. Fear slipped through. A flash, but unmistakable. Because in that moment she realized something. I wasn't frightened. I wasn't bending. I wasn't playing her game. She didn't know what I knew. She didn't understand how close the truth stood behind her shoulder. "I'm done accommodating you," she said, though her voice shook now. "You're not welcome here until further notice." "All right," I replied. She blinked. "What?" "I heard you." That was all. No tears, no pleading, no explanations. Just acceptance, the kind that terrifies bullies more than any shouting ever could. When Daniel returned, confused, wiping his hands on a towel, Monica stepped toward him as if ready to deliver her rehearsed version. But something in her face made him hesitate, and something in mine made him stop entirely. The room held its breath around us. The next move was no longer hers. Not anymore. Daniel showed up at my house the next morning, earlier than he ever came on weekends. I heard his car door slam, then his hurried steps on the walkway. When I opened the door, he stood there looking pale, uncertain, as if the ground had shifted beneath him overnight. "Mom, can we talk?" he asked. I stepped aside and let him in. He didn't sit. He paced slowly, rubbing his thumb against his palm, a habit he had as a child when something frightened him. "Monica told me what she said to you yesterday," he began. "About limiting visits, about you being unstable." He swallowed hard, eyes darting toward mine, searching for reassurance. "I don't believe her," he added quickly. "But I don't understand anything anymore." I nodded. He wasn't lying. I could see the conflict tearing at him like opposing tides. A good man caught between loyalty and truth. "Sit down, Daniel," I said gently. He obeyed, hands clasped tightly. I sat across from him, close enough that he couldn't avoid my eyes. "I want to show you something," I said. He frowned. "What is it?" "A piece of the truth." I stood, walked to my bedroom, and retrieved the small silver USB drive from my jewelry box, the one holding the recording. When I returned, Daniel looked at it as if it were a foreign object, something that didn't belong in his mother's soft, quiet world. But mothers hold many things their children never see. I plugged it into the old laptop on the coffee table. The screen glowed to life, the video file waiting, its name unremarkable. I clicked it. Daniel leaned forward. The footage began. our brunch, the familiar kitchen, the sunlight across the counter. He watched himself laughing, watched Monica stand behind me with her coffee mug. Already, I saw him tense. Then came the moment. Her pause. Her look toward the camera she'd forgotten. Her hand shifting, not slipping, shifting. The deliberate pour, the tiny smile. The gasp she performed a second later. The mug hitting the floor. My cry of pain, her performance of concern. I didn't look at the screen. I didn't need to. I watched my son instead. His face drained of color. His jaw tightened until I thought it might crack. His breath hitched, sharp and quiet. Then his hand rose to his mouth, not to hide emotion, but to steady himself against the force of it. When the video ended, the room felt heavier, the air thicker. He stayed frozen in place, staring at the blank screen long after the image was gone. "Daniel," I said softly, "I didn't want you to see this, but you needed to." He didn't answer. His eyes were glassy with disbelief, with shame, with something older, grief for the version of his wife he had believed in. "Finally," he whispered, She did that on purpose? Yes. And then she lied to me? Yes. And she tried to make you look unstable. She tried," I said. "But truth stands, even when people try to bury it." He put his head in his hands, shoulders shaking slightly, not from tears, but from anger, building under the surface like a quiet storm. "All this time," he murmured, "I thought you were pulling away. I thought you were upset over nothing." "I was upset," I said gently, "just not over nothing." He lifted his head, eyes raw. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because you weren't ready to listen, and because I didn't want to hurt you unless I had no choice." He closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, he looked older, heavier, as though the truth had carved something new into him. "What do I do now?" he whispered. "That's for you to decide," I said. "But understand this, Daniel. Whatever you choose with full knowledge now." He nodded slowly, painfully. The truth wasn't just his to witness anymore. Now it was his to carry, and it would change everything. Daniel didn't confront Monica right away. That wasn't his nature. He was a slow-burning man, the kind who carried emotion in his chest until he found a place steady enough to set it down. But the truth has its own gravity. It pulls at you, reshapes you, demands you face what you've avoided. 2 days passed quietly. Too quietly. Then, late in the evening, he called. "Mom," he said, voice low, strained, "I need to talk to you after I speak with Monica. I don't know how this is going to go." I could hear the tremor under his words, the tremor of a man walking into a room where something sacred has cracked. "Take your time," I told him. "I'll be here." He exhaled shakily. "I know." Later that night, the storm broke. I wasn't there, but Daniel told me everything afterward, and I could see it clearly in my mind. He found Monica in the living room, scrolling through her phone, utterly unaware that the foundation beneath her was about to shift. "Monica," he began, "we need to talk about the brunch." She looked up too quickly, her smile too wide. "Again? Daniel, I already told you. I saw the video," he said. The smile cracked. Just a hairline fracture, but enough. "What video?" she asked too fast. "You know which one." Her face drained of color. She stood, her phone slipping slightly in her hand. "Who showed you that?" "That's private." "It's the truth," he said. "And it's mine to know." She shook her head, stepping back. "It wasn't what it looked like. I tripped." "No." His voice held none of its usual softness. "You didn't trip. You aimed." That one word, aimed, landed like a stone between them. Monica recovered quickly, as she always did. Daniel, she's manipulating you. Your mother is playing victim. Stop. He didn't raise his voice, but the firmness cut through the air. I know what I saw. She blinked rapidly, searching for a foothold in an argument no longer built on her terms. You're going to believe a single clip over your own wife? I'm going to believe my eyes, he said quietly. And my mother. There it was. The shift. The turning of his loyalty to its rightful place. Monica's mask slipped then, her voice rising, cracked around the edges. Do you have any idea what she's doing? She's trying to destroy this family. Daniel stepped closer, but not in anger, in heartbreak. You destroyed something, Monica, the moment you hurt her. Her breath caught. Panic flared, real and raw. She deserved it, she blurted, then froze, too late to pull the words back. Daniel stared at her, stunned. Deserved it? I didn't mean, she covered her mouth. She's always judging me, always getting in the way. She loved you, he said, his voice almost whisper-soft. She tried so hard to make space for you. She makes me feel small, Monica whispered. No, he said. Your actions make you feel small. She sank onto the sofa, her face crumpling, not out of remorse but out of losing control. Daniel, please. He didn't move to comfort her. I need time, he said finally. And I need distance. He turned away from her, something inside him closing like a door. For now, you will not speak to my mother. About anything. Her sob caught in her throat. You're choosing her over me. I'm choosing what's right, he said. And for the first time in years, he meant it. He left the house that night and drove straight to mine. When I opened the door, he looked older, exhausted, but clear. Finally clear. He stepped inside, took my hand gently, and said only, Mom, I'm so sorry. I held his hand, the same hand I once guided across streets and through school hallways, and I felt something loosen inside both of us. The truth had done what it always does. It had broken the silence and begun to rebuild the man. The days after Daniel confronted Monica felt strangely calm, like the quiet that settles after a long storm. Not peace, exactly, but the beginning of it. A house that had held tension like humidity now seemed to exhale, even if the air still tasted of something broken. Daniel stayed with me for 2 nights, not because he asked, but because he arrived at my door carrying exhaustion in his bones and a small overnight bag in his hand. He didn't say much at first. He sat at my table, drinking tea with both hands wrapped around the cup, like a man steadying himself. I don't know who I've been living with, he said once, voice barely above a whisper. You've been living with someone who felt threatened by kindness, I answered gently. That's not your fault. He nodded, eyes lowered. There's a special kind of heartbreak a son feels when he realizes he defended the wrong person for too long. I could see it settling onto him in layers. But slowly, over the next few days, something else settled too. Clarity. He began making lists. Things he needed to address. Questions he needed answered. Boundaries he needed to set. And each time he finished a thought, he looked at me like he was finally seeing the woman who raised him, not the one Monica had tried to diminish. When he returned home to speak with her again, I didn't accompany him. This wasn't my battle anymore. It was his. And a man must reclaim his home on his own feet, even when those feet tremble. Later, he told me what happened. Monica had been waiting in the living room, eyes swollen from tears. Some real, most strategic. She reached for him the moment he walked in. Daniel, please, can we fix this? I love you. He stepped back, A small step, but firm. "Love doesn't excuse cruelty," he said. She shook her head violently. "I wasn't cruel. Your mother provokes me. She pushes me. She always has." "Stop," he said. "I'm done listening to excuses." She froze, stunned. She wasn't used to him interrupting her. "I want rules," Daniel continued. "Clear ones. And they start with this. You will treat my mother with respect." Her mouth opened, but he raised a hand. "No more remarks. No more games. No more lies. If you feel threatened by her presence, that's your feeling to manage, not her burden." I imagined her face as he said it, tight, confused, desperate to redirect control she no longer had. "And," he added, "we're going to counseling." Monica blinked rapidly. "Counseling? You think I'm the problem?" "I think we have a problem," he said, "and that begins with honesty, something you haven't shown much of." Another strike she didn't see coming. Then, gently but firmly, he added, "You are not to speak to my mother until I say otherwise." The silence that followed must have been thick enough to touch. Monica, stripped of her usual weapons, could only whisper, "So she wins." He shook his head. "No, truth wins." That line, when he repeated it to me later, pulled something tight in my chest. The shift wasn't loud, but it was deep. He was separating what he owed his wife from what he owed himself, and what he owed me. A tether long tangled was finally straightening. In the days that followed, Monica kept her distance. No calls, no sharp messages, no invitations laced with poison. She didn't dare. And for the first time in years, I moved through my home without the weight of her shadow trailing me. One evening, Daniel came over with my granddaughter. The little one ran straight into my arms laughing, her small hands warm against my neck. Daniel watched us with a soft smile. Tired, yes, but lighter. When he helped me carry groceries inside, he paused at the doorway. "Mom," he said, "I'm working on things. I don't know where they'll end, but I promise you this, your place in my life isn't changing again." My throat tightened. I simply nodded. Promises spoken quietly are the ones you can believe in. It would take time to rebuild everything Monica had chipped away. But for the first time, the rebuilding had begun. Not with anger, but with truth. And truth, once rooted, grows stronger than fear ever could. I didn't rush to return to their home. A lifetime teaches you the value of timing, how stepping back can be as powerful as stepping forward. So when Daniel finally said, "Mom, why don't you come for dinner this weekend?" I simply nodded and said, I'd think about it. Not to punish him, not to create worry, just to let the moment breathe. In the end, I went. The evening was cool and soft, the kind that quiets the world. When I arrived, Daniel opened the door before I could knock, almost as if he'd been standing behind it, listening for my footsteps. His eyes softened when he saw me. "Mom," he said, "I'm glad you're here." Inside, the house felt different. Not visibly. Chairs were still in their places, the same artwork hung on the walls. But something deeper had shifted. The air no longer carried the sharp tension that used to scrape at my skin the moment I walked in. The house felt still, waiting. My granddaughter ran up to me first, as she always did, arms outstretched and warm with trust. I lifted her carefully, my hand still tender, though healing. Her laughter wrapped around me like a blanket I hadn't realized I'd been missing. Daniel guided us into the dining room, where the table was already set. Simple food, nothing showy. I could tell he had cooked most of it himself. His movements still awkward, still unsure, but earnest. He'd always relied on Monica to orchestrate these evenings. Now he was trying to fill the gaps on his own. She's upstairs, he said quietly, glancing toward the staircase. She won't be joining us tonight. I thought... He hesitated. I thought it would be better this way. I didn't answer immediately. I only took my seat, smoothing my napkin across my lap. That's fine, I said at last. Dinner passed gently. We talked about small things, his job, the garden I'd begun tending again, my granddaughter's new obsession with pressing leaves into books. Ordinary things. But there was a new ease to it, a calm that had been absent for years. Daniel wasn't distracted or tense or trying to balance two invisible weights in his hands. He simply was present. Awake. A son returning to himself as much as to me. When he walked me to my car afterward, the porch light cast a soft cone of gold across the driveway. He lingered there, hands in his pockets. I'm sorry, he said. The words came slow, like stones he'd been carrying too long. For all the times I didn't see. For all the times I didn't ask. You were trying to keep peace, I said gently. Sometimes we confuse peace with silence. He exhaled, a long breath that seemed to lighten his frame. I don't want to be blind anymore. To you, or to what's happening in my own home. You're not blind, I said. You're waking up. That takes courage. He looked down, then up again, and for the first time in years, I saw the boy he once was, the boy who used to run to me when he scraped his knee, not because he feared the pain, but because he trusted I'd help him stand again. I need you in my life, he whispered. And I'm here, I replied. He nodded, swallowing hard. Monica knows she crossed a line she can't hide from. She's been quiet, trying to figure out what's left for her to hold on to. That's her journey, I said softly. Not mine. And it was true. I felt no need to hover over the consequences, no urge to watch her unravel or rise. Her behavior would take its own shape. The truth would work on her in ways I did not need to witness. When I drove away, the sky had turned a muted violet. Street lamps blinked on, one by one, guiding my path home. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was escaping anything. I felt like I was returning to myself, to a steadiness I thought age had taken from me. And as the quiet of my house wrapped around me again, it no longer felt like loneliness. It felt like dignity, earned, claimed, and finally restored. I woke earlier than usual that morning, before the sun had fully risen. The house was still, wrapped in the soft blue of dawn, and for a long moment I simply sat at the edge of my bed, feeling the quiet settle around me. Age teaches you to appreciate mornings like that. Mornings where nothing hurts more than usual, where the air feels gentle, where your own breath sounds like company rather than loneliness. My hand had almost healed. A faint pinkness remained, tender to the touch, but no longer angry. It looked like something that had happened a long time ago, not something that had tried to unmake me just weeks before. I made tea slowly, the old kettle humming as steam filled the kitchen. My house felt different now, though nothing inside it had changed. The difference was in me. Walls soften when the person inside stands taller. Daniel stopped by mid-morning. He knocked gently, like someone entering a place of reverence, and when I opened the door, he greeted me with a warm, honest smile. "Mom," he said, "I thought maybe we could take a walk." We walked the quiet sidewalk outside my house, just the two of us, the early light brushing gold across the tops of the trees. He talked about work, about the counseling sessions he and Monica had begun, about how hard it was and how necessary. He didn't defend her anymore. He didn't justify her actions or soften them. He spoke like a man finally seeing all the corners of his own life. "There's a lot we need to rebuild," he admitted, "but I want to do it right this time." "That's all anyone can ask," I said. He hesitated. "Mom, do you forgive her?" I took my time answering. Forgiveness is not a simple thing, especially for wounds that cut quietly. "I don't carry anger," I finally said. "That's enough." He nodded, accepting the truth rather than forcing a prettier version of it. We walked in silence for a while, the kind that feels shared rather than empty. When he left that afternoon, he hugged me tightly and kissed the top of my head, just as he used to when he was young enough to stand on a chair to reach me. I watched him drive away with a steadiness I hadn't felt in years. Later, as the sun dipped low and the rooms filled with amber light, I sat in my living room, the same place where I had once nursed my burned hand, and wondered whether my voice still mattered in this world. I looked around at the quiet, the framed photographs, the books worn at the edges, the plant by the window turning its leaves toward the fading sun. It struck me then how much of my life I had lived softly. Not weakly, softly. There is a difference. Soft things endure. They bend and survive where harder things break. But there is a time in every woman's life, especially a woman my age, when softness alone is no longer enough. When you must stand up not to fight, but to be seen. I stood up, and it changed everything. The burn healed, but the lesson stayed. You can love your children fiercely and still expect respect. You can be gentle and still refuse to bend. You can age and still rise. As evening settled in, I let the last of the light touch my face, and I felt a quiet sort of victory. Private, steady, earned. I wasn't triumphant. I wasn't vindictive. I was simply whole again. And if my story finds its way to someone who needs it, someone who has been small for too long, I hope they hear the truth in my voice. It is never too late to reclaim your dignity. If this story touched you, share your thoughts below or follow along for more. Quiet strength deserves to be heard.